What's up guys, it's me Jeremy. When it comes to solo queue especially, facing a prominent split push can be really frustrating since oftentimes it feels like there's nothing you can do and you just collapse under the pressure. Anyways, here are my tips and tricks for how to deal with split pushing. Let's get started. The first thing to understand is the reason why split pushing is such a successful tactic. Split pushing works because it takes advantage of indecisive opponents by being able to get something out of stalling a team, something which isn't very hard to do versus the uncoordinated opponents of solo queue. The key here is that split pushing is fantastic versus indecisive opponents, so in order to deal with the split push, you need to recognize what's going on and react quickly. Now, there are two major ways to actually deal with split pushing, and I guess a third way, but it isn't always practical. The first is to send someone to hold the lane, while the second is to ignore the split push completely and try to force a trade-off in objectives. The third way is simply to just gank the split pusher with multiple players, but that isn't always the best idea. All ways of dealing with the split push have pros and cons, and depending on your situation, one way might be a lot more practical than another way. For when it comes to sending someone to hold the lane, you want to do this when your team is not in a good position to teamfight or to go for an objective 4 versus 5. Potential reasons for this may be that your other lanes are not pushed out, your team has a hard time sieging, or you have poor initiation ability. Whatever the case, sending someone to hold the lane would be the way to go. You want to send a player back who will not completely ruin your 4v4, that can also still hold the towers from being taken down. Usually this will be your top laner or your jungler. When the person you send goes to hold the lane, it's very important that they do not die 1 versus 1 to the opponent, or the split pusher gets what is essentially a free pass. And so you shouldn't try to fight the split pusher 1 versus 1 at all, even if you think you're stronger. Just hold the lane. If you get tower dove and still die 1 versus 1, that means the person you sent back to handle the split push either made a mistake or they more likely weren't strong enough, and so you should have sent someone else and you sent the wrong person. It's usually good to send the top laner since they will either be tanky or have strong wave clear, and so they can usually handle it, as well as not being too detrimental to your team fight 4 versus 4. You really want to be able to handle the split push without having to send back 2 players so you don't lose out somewhere else on the map, and so you really need to pick which player you send back carefully. As your player holds the lane, the rest of your team can rotate in 4 versus 4 the opponent, or if they're not going for any objectives, you can rotate to end the split push. Another way to deal with split pushing is to ignore the split pusher entirely and make a 4 versus 5 play on the rest of the map. This is actually the optimal play to deal with the split push, but it's tough to be in a spot where you can decisively react with this option. But anyways, you want to ignore the split push completely and force a trade-off when your team is in a good spot to teamfight, take more objectives than the split pusher can, or if your team is strong at sieging or tower diving. It's also a great way to handle things when you're ahead, since the split pusher won't be that strong and you can easily just tower dive your opponents and force your way in. Generally, you want to do this when your team is able to take more objectives than the split pusher can if left alone. The rest of the team will be 4 versus 5, so you will have strong control of the map if the game is close or if you're ahead. Force a play and initiate if that is what your team is strong at, or perhaps push up fast and siege heavily. Quite often you'll be able to outpace the split pusher and easily come out ahead in both objectives and kills, as long as you don't lose the 4 versus 5. If you can't win or get anything off of the 4 versus 5, you should not be choosing this way to deal with the split push. And the third option is to simply gank the split pusher, relieve the pressure, and continue to push out, and you'll have a nice 4 versus 5 for a decent amount of time. However, the reason why the third option is unreliable, and honestly is actually terrible in an ideal scenario, is because it only works versus people who are bad at split pushing. In an ideal scenario for the split pusher, they get ganked and the 4 players on their team go get a huge objective like Baron or another tower. However, in solo queue, a lot of players suck at split pushing, and I do mean a lot. Most people split push before their team even sets up a play, when in theory it's supposed to be in the opposite order. You want your team to set up a play and then you go split push. If the 4 players on the other team are not in a spot to take any objectives, you can easily just get a flank on the split pusher, take the free kill, and push out and go for your own objective. And lastly, one thing you can do to deny split pushers almost completely, or at the very least really slow down the speed of their push, is to keep your lanes pushed out. Pushing out your lanes is really important and is often underestimated, and pushing the lanes out is a great way to deny split push opportunities, since it will take the opponent a long time to set up a split push, since they'll have to push the wave back and likely clear about 2 to 3 waves, giving you a full minute or so to react properly and easily handle the situation. And that just about covers it. My name is Jeremy, and that's it for my video on how to deal with split pushing. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button so I can tell, and be sure to check me out over on all the socials of which you can see on your screen. And if you really enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe for some more awesome content in the future, or check out some of my other videos on your screen as well. And above all else, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.